restaurant across the street, something stopped him cold. Through the wide glass windows he saw her. Emily Rhodes, his boss. She sat stiffly across from a man who leaned too close, talking too loudly, his smile sharp and practiced. Emily's polite smile never reached her eyes. Daniel knew that look. He'd seen it on his late wife's face years ago at a family gathering when she felt trapped but didn't want to cause a scene. Daniel told himself to keep walking. Emily was the CEO of the company he worked for, a woman far out of his league, far above his pay grade. She was powerful, confident, and completely unaware of how often Daniel quietly admired her strength from afar. He was just the facilities manager, the guy who fixed broken doors and stayed late to make sure the building was locked. But then he saw her hand tighten around her glass. The man laughed and reached across the table, touching her wrist without permission. Emily pulled back slightly, her shoulders tensing. Daniel didn't think anymore. He walked in. The host barely looked up as Daniel crossed the room with steady steps. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with a protective instinct he hadn't felt since becoming a father. When he reached their table, he didn't hesitate. "Emily," he said warmly, as if this was planned. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." Emily looked up, startled, then confused, then something like relief flickered across her face. "I'm sorry." Man snapped. "We're in the middle of something." Daniel smiled politely, the kind of smile that didn't invite argument. "I know, but there's an emergency at the office. You asked me to come get you if it happened." Emily stared at him for half a second longer, then understood. "Oh," she said softly, standing up. "Right, the emergency." The man scoffed, seriously. "This is unprofessional." Daniel met his eyes calmly. "What's unprofessional is not taking no for an answer." The room seemed to quiet. The man flushed red, muttered something under his breath, and leaned back in his chair. Emily picked up her purse with slightly trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered as they walked out together. Outside, the night air felt cooler, calmer. Emily stopped near the curb, finally letting out a breath she'd been holding for far too long. "You didn't have to do that," she said. Daniel shrugged. "I wanted to." She looked at him, then not as a boss looks at an employee, but as a woman looks at someone who just showed up when she needed it most. "I didn't feel safe," she admitted quietly, "and I didn't know how to leave without making it worse." Daniel nodded. "You don't ever owe anyone your comfort." There was a pause between them, filled with unspoken emotion. "I should get home," Daniel said at last. "My son's waiting." Emily smiled faintly. "You're a good father." He blinked. "How did you talk about him sometimes," she said, "when you think no one's listening." They shared a small, almost shy smile. Daniel turned to leave, believing that was the end of it. He didn't know Emily stood there long after he walked away, watching him disappear down the street, her heart racing, her mind replaying the way he had stepped in without hesitation. And he had no idea that the woman he had just saved had been in love with him for a very long time. He thought he was just doing his job. She knew he was the man she'd been waiting for, and this time, she wasn't going to stay silent. The next morning, Daniel arrived at work expecting nothing more than another ordinary day. He fixed a flickering light on the third floor, replaced a broken lock near the conference room, and drank his coffee standing up like always. What he didn't expect was the message waiting in his inbox. "Emily Rhodes wants to see you." Immediately, his stomach dropped. He knocked on her office door with nervous knuckles, already rehearsing apologies in his head. Maybe he'd crossed a line. Maybe he'd embarrassed her. Maybe. "Daniel," Emily said gently, "come in." She wasn't behind her desk. She stood near the window, arms folded, sunlight outlining her silhouette. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "Properly." "You don't need to," he replied quickly. "I didn't mean to overstep." "You didn't," she said firmly. "You protected me." Silence stretched between them. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly. Daniel hesitated. Then he told the truth. "Because I saw someone who looked like they needed help, and because I'd want someone to do the same for my son someday." Emily's eyes filled, and she turned away before he could see. "I've been surrounded by people my whole life," she said quietly. "Powerful people, loud people, people who wanted something from me. But last night, you were the first person who made me feel safe." Daniel swallowed. "Emily, I know," she said, turning back to him. "You're a single dad. You keep your life small because it has to be. But I need you to know something." She took a breath, steady but brave. "I've been in love with you for months." The words hung in the air, fragile and terrifying. Daniel stared at her, stunned. "That's not possible." "It is," she said. "I see how you treat people, how you never complain." How you rush out every day because someone at home needs you. I fell in love with your quiet strength." He shook his head, emotion rising fast. I don't have much to give." Emily stepped closer. "You gave me everything I needed when you walked into that restaurant." For the first time in years, Daniel let himself be seen not as a worker, not as a struggling father, but as a man worthy of love. Their relationship didn't happen overnight. There were challenges, fear, doubt, long talks about Noah, about balance, about the risks of mixing work and heart, but they faced them together, honestly, patiently. When Daniel finally introduced Emily to his son, Noah smiled and said, "You make my dad laugh again." And that was all Emily needed to hear. Final message, inspiring close. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a simple act of courage. Not wealth, not status, just kindness, timing, and the bravery to step in when someone needs you most. Because love doesn't ask who you are, it shows you who you can become.